All right, we'll go ahead and get started in just a second. All right, a couple questions coming in. Good stuff. All right, and then let me share my video. All right, we are live. All right, so my name is Chris Berry, certified financial planner and certified elder law attorney, where we help clients plan, protect, and preserve what's important to them. And we do that through legal, financial, and tax planning. A couple questions coming in. Okay. So I always like to start with a positive focus, something positive that happened over the last week or so. And last week, my family, my wife and I, we went on vacation, and it was pretty awesome. The downside is my wife ended up getting COVID, and so I'm also quarantining just to be safe right now. I'm negative, no symptoms, so that's good. So that's a positive. But if you had something scheduled with us in person this week, we wanted to reschedule just for safety purposes. So with that, again, we do these weekly webinars every week. So if you do have questions, please put it in the Q&A. I didn't have a lot of questions ahead of time, so I brought up something that a lot of people have been asking. And then a couple of questions have come in just now talking about I-bonds. So we'll go ahead and get into it. So first thing that a lot of people have been asking just in passing, or as we're doing our reviews, is like, what's going on with the markets and when are they going to rebound? I wish I could look into a crystal ball and tell you exactly when that's going to be, but no one can really predict that. But what I'll say is myself and a lot of other people think that there's going to be continued volatility, really probably to the next presidential election. Not getting into politics too much, but just with the way things are going, with how the Fed is kind of flip-flopping on different things, that's causing a lot of uncertainty. Plus everything else going on in the world, whether it's supply chain issues, now inflation being out of control. So we had the big dip starting basically in January, and we've kind of been slowly rebuilding a little bit, but it's going to be continued volatility. And so that actually leads me into this next question, which I'll get to. But given that, what should we be doing with the money? And I always look to what is the purpose of the money? What are we trying to do? And we always like to do kind of like a bucket approach of, based on time horizons. So kind of have a now bucket of money, a soon bucket of money, and a later bucket of money. So your now bucket is basically the money you need over the next year or so. So years 0 to 1. Your soon bucket might be years 5 to 10, or years, I'm sorry, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, depending on kind of how old you are. And then your later bucket is just kind of later. So after years 5 plus, or 10 plus, depending on the situation. And so the idea is that you figure out like, what is the purpose of these different buckets of money that you have? So your now bucket is really, think of that as just your checking savings. That should just be what you have sitting in cash. And that should be things like whatever your emergency fund is. Which is typically 3 to 6 months worth of whatever your expenses are. Second thing would be any big expenses you have planned. So my wife and I just took a big trip. We wanted to make sure we could pay for that. So we had that money sitting in cash. I'm taking my son to Disney World on his birthday. Just a guy's trip. It's a surprise for him, so don't tell him. Yeah, and so I need to make sure that I have money for Disney World. I call it tithing to the mouse god. And then when you're in retirement, or if you're not working, you might have an income gap where you have expenses that aren't covered by either your wages or Social Security. And so typically we would recommend having about a year's worth of whatever that income gap is sitting in checking savings so you don't have to worry about everything. So really for our clients where we're sitting down and going through the financial planning process as certified financial planner, yeah, we're seeing volatility, but we're covered for the year. We know where our income's coming from. So then the question is what to do in that soon bucket. What if this is money that you need to use within the next couple of years? And typically this is going to be money that's more conservative and more geared towards income. with the idea, with the idea that each year you might have to move money from that soon bucket to that now bucket. And then your later bucket of money is money more geared towards growth. Maybe it's long-term care in the future. Maybe it's legacy. But we can be more aggressive with this money because we're not going to touch it right away. And so looking at, okay, we're going to have volatility over the next year or so. What should we be doing with the money? First, what I would say is just having a good plan, understanding what you need in cash to get you through the year. And then everything else should be, at least to a certain extent, not sitting in cash, getting some type of return. And one of the two questions actually that came in from separate people are with regards to I bonds. And this is something that we've been talking about for the last couple months because these I bonds are tied to inflation. Like historically, if you look at I bonds, they offer like a 1 to maybe 3% rate of return over time. But they're tied to inflation. And so right now we're having like records, haven't seen this in decades, inflation where got lunch, had lunch, bought lunch for my wife and I just now. And I was just shocked at something that used to be, say, $15 was like $30. I was like, holy cow. So we are all feeling inflation. And so the I bonds are tied to the CPI and the inflation numbers. And so for the last couple of months, if you're to move money into I bonds, you're going to get, it was just over an 8% rate of return. Now it's over a 9% rate of return. Now there's certain limitations. So with the I bonds, first of all, you can only put in $10,000. And to get to John's question, if you're using your tax refund, you can put in up to $15,000 individually. So each person, like if you're a married couple, each of you could get your own separate I bond, which could be $10,000, $15,000. If you have adult age children, maybe this is a good option. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a guaranteed rate of return for a period of time. And right now that rate of return is just over 9%, which is pretty awesome. And you're going to be locked in for a period of about 6 months. But then, and this is getting to Gary's question, clearly it must be held for 1 year. Yeah, so I bonds would not be in the now bucket of money. We would be looking at I bonds in the soon bucket. This is money that, you know what, we're going to put it away. We're not going to touch it for a year, but let's reevaluate what's going on in a year. And getting to Gary's question, I've heard you cash in before 5 years, you lose the last 3 months of interest. Is this true? Yeah. So the idea is these I bonds, you want to theoretically hold them for a period of 5 years. If you cash them in sooner to the 5-year mark, what they do is they take your last 3 months of interest. But I tell you what, if you run the numbers, even if you hold it just for a year and then you sacrifice a couple months worth of interest, it's a great way to put, say, $10,000 or $20,000 if you're a married couple. So what I've been recommending to clients is for money kind of in that soon bucket, if you have a lot sitting in cash, explore I bonds. Now understand there's a cap of how much you can put in. So again, typically it's 10,000. If you're using your tax return, it can be up to $15,000 per person. And then the interesting thing is if you have a trust, whether a revocable living trust or a asset protection trust, like a castle trust, not only can you buy an I bond in your name, your spouse's name, your kids, if you wanted to, you can even buy I bonds, another set of I bonds in the trust where the trust is the owner. Another caveat with the I bonds is that you cannot name a trust as a beneficiary of the I bond. The trust can be the owner, the trust cannot be the beneficiary. And so in those situations, a lot of times you'll just name the kids as the beneficiary instead of the trust, even if you have a trust. Normally we would want to name the trust, but an I bond does not allow you to name a trust as a beneficiary. Trust can be the owner, and we'd recommend getting those. Here's a question coming in. Easier and likely, is it comparable or inferior to I bonds? I bonds has the limits and requires monitoring and eventually remembering to liquidate separate accounts. STIP is existing broker accounts, and trust is easier and not likely to be forgotten. Is it comparable or inferior to I bonds? So STIP, I'll have to take a look at that. I think that's based on an index, but I'll look into that. But I'll tell you an option if you're looking for more than I bonds. Um, we do have a tool that guarantees. It's kind of a unique tool, but you have a choice. And we call this tool, it's called Legacy Excel. And I don't talk tools very often, but I think this one is an important one to bring up, especially if you have cash and we're looking at kind of soon bucket money where we want to buy ourselves a year where we don't have to worry about whether the market's going up or down. We can get at least something. So the Legacy Excel, it basically has two indexes that we can choose from. One is a guaranteed fixed rate of 3%, which isn't great. And again, this is something that we won't touch for a year, but it's better than having money sitting in cash because it's not even, your cash isn't even keeping up with inflation. So if there's a chunk of change greater than the $10,000 limit on I bond, one of the things we recommend is looking at this Legacy Excel tool, and this is something that we can help you with. There's really we can put hundreds of thousands of dollars into this. The other option is we can look at a index that might give you anywhere from 0% to say 10%. Kind of depends on how the markets do. And so if we're doing it just for a year, a lot of times we're looking at, hey, just give me the fixed 3%. I'll take that. If we're going greater than a year, so greater than a year, then we might look at a combination of one portion in the 3%, one portion tied to the index. But it is a tool that if you like the idea of, you know what, let me just buy a year to get through this volatility, it's another tool going along with I bonds. But I would always start with the I bonds right now, like a guaranteed over 9% rate of return, even with some of the drawbacks of if you use it after a year and before the 5-year mark, you're penalized 3 months worth of interest. It's still a good deal. So for a lot of our clients, we're recommending each spouse, if you're married, getting a set of the I bonds. And then if you're looking to kind of protect more money, like I had a hypothetical client, they had kind of sold a business and had $300,000 and trying to figure out what to do with it. Didn't want to put it in the market right now because of all the volatility. We did the Legacy Excel and buys a year where, okay, as the markets kind of go sideways, we'll at least get 3%. And then in a year, we can reevaluate where we want to invest that. And there's no penalties or fees for that. Unlike the I bonds, you're penalized for 3 months. But still, I bonds are a great deal. Okay, so that is the only questions I had. A lot of I bond questions. How does the beneficiary aspect work with taxes when a bond owner dies? Walk me through what happens on the death of the owner. I have to double check this, but what I want to say is that there could be potential capital gains on it, but I'll have to double check because also I'd lean towards no. And again, I bonds are relatively new as a planning tool just because historically inflation hasn't been out of control like this. So that's why some of the technical details I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can get back to you on the tax upon death. It's either going to be tax-free or it's going to be capital gains would be my bet, but I'll get clarification on that. I don't know everything off the top of my head. Okay, all right. Well, that's all I got. If you do have more questions, feel free to put it, reply to the email, and I'll make sure to answer those questions.